So we're going to do one more part to lesson 3-5, and that's converting from standard form to slope-intercept form. So again, the last piece to our pennants. And I would probably say that Thursday, your only job after Thursday work would be to get them, your pennants all glued onto the string and moving on from there. Okay? So, Seth, we're taking notes, and looks like you got gum in your mouth. Garbage can, please. Comes from 111. All right, so the two things we need to do is to remind ourselves what does standard form look like, because that's what we're going to be given. And we want it to turn into slope-intercept form. So standard form, it's at ax plus by equals c. X term has to come in front of the y term. The constant has to be alone. What can you tell me about the a, b, and c? What are some things you remember about the a, b, and c? A, you remember one thing?
B equals y-intercept.
Not in this case, and here's the reason why. When you think of slope-intercept form, the b is not a capital one, it's a lowercase one. So even though they both represent b, because they're not identical in size, they actually don't refer to the same thing. Okay, I'm glad you said that, because that is a misunderstanding some people have. Michael?
The a and the x are always positive?
Yes, the a term has to be positive, therefore making the x positive. Sophia?
Please excuse this interruption. This is an earthquake.
Okay, so standard form is ax plus by equals c, but slope-intercept form,
I cannot see. It's y.
have to. Okay, so for y-intercept, slope-intercept, it's y equals mx plus b. Now, notice that both of them have a b, but on the left, it's a capital B, and on the right, it's a lowercase b. That means they aren't the same number. So you can't just pick out that b from in front of the y and place it where the b is in the slope-intercept form. So remembering with standard form, the x and the y have to be together on the left with the x in front. Can anyone remember what needs to be true about the a value? Michael, you remember?
Always positive.
It's going to be positive, though I'm going to tell you right now on some of the homework for tonight, it shows up negative, so some of the equations aren't technically in standard form, but they're close. And then a, b, and c are considered integers, which means no fractions or decimals. And again, on the worksheet you guys are going to work on tonight, you will see some fractions and decimals on that. So what we're going to need to do is to recognize, first off, that these two share something in common. They both have an x and a y. The rest of the letters that you're seeing actually are representing numbers. Okay? Notice that there's no m in standard form. The slope is not revealed the way that it's written. In order to find slope, we have to rewrite it into slope-intercept form, which is what we're going to be working on today. So in order to get ax plus by equals c to look like y equals mx plus b, we're going to need to take standard form and solve it for y. So step one, you're going to add or subtract. So I'm going to tell you honestly, if somebody has written this in true standard form notation, my a will always be positive, which means the opposite would be negative. So I would always be using subtraction. However, tonight's homework isn't technically always in standard form, and some of the x terms are negative, so you will have to add. So you're going to add or subtract the x term to both sides. So I'm just going to show you algebraically how this is going to look, and then we'll do some examples. So we have the ax plus by equals c. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract the ax from both sides. Now remember, the only variable that we actually have is the x and the y, so the a, b, c are not variables, they just represent numbers. So at this point, we're at by equals negative ax plus c. So remember with the slope-intercept form, the x term always comes after the equals. All right, so looking at the equation that we've got to now, by equals negative ax plus c, what do I need to get it into standard form? What's my next step? Liam? Yeah, and how am I going to do that mathematically?
Divide by both sides.
Yeah, divide both sides by, and I'm going to say the coefficient of the y term. So when we divide both sides by the coefficient of the y term, I would be dividing everything by b. So when I add and subtract, that value that's being added or subtracted shows up once on the left of the equals, once on the right of the equals. However, if I do any multiplication or division, it applies to every single term that I have. So this leaves me with y equals negative a over bx plus c over b. And that actually very much resembles slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So basically this value and these values, they'd be equal to each other. And this is equal to this. Okay? So that's all you have to do, at most 2 steps. And then you've got the equation in slope-intercept form, and then you'd be able to identify what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. Now you could do y-intercept very easily from standard form. So our directions are going to ask us to rewrite from standard form to slope-intercept form. So again, the last pennant from each of the pages, the 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20, all of them were written in standard form, and all of them need to be written in slope-intercept form. And that, it's funny though, they put the slope for, they asked you to figure out slope first, and then they asked you to write the equation in slope-intercept form, which you actually can't figure out the slope until it's written in slope-intercept form. But the whole point to the pennants was to emphasize slope. All right, so the first one we've got is 2x minus 5y equals negative 15. So according to our notes, the first thing we're going to do is to get the x term to leave the left and to end up on the right. Since he's positive, and he should be in most cases, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. Now probably the single biggest mistake is people forget there's a negative in front of the 5y. He's still there. So I get negative 5y, the negative 2x goes after the equals. Now, the y is not alone, so what am I going to do to get the y alone? And what am I going to divide by? Yeah, I have to divide everything by negative 5. Notice I'm never multiplying or dividing by the variable, ever. So negative 5 divided by itself is 1. 1 times y is y. 2 negatives make a positive, so I get 2/5, and then the x gets written opposite the fraction bar. 2 negatives make a positive, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. So that's what you're hoping to get. Now, what you can do from that is identify the slope. What's the slope in this line? 2/5. And what's the y-intercept? 3. Well, again, like I said, you could identify the y-intercept with it being in slope-intercept form. I mean in standard form, but you can only get the slope from the slope-intercept form. All right, let's look at the next one. What am I going to do to both sides to get the y term alone? Okay, it's either adding or subtracting first. Since 6x is positive, I'm going to subtract 6x. And that gives me y equals negative 6x plus 8. Now, the great news is there's no coefficient outside of 1, so I'm actually done. There's nothing more I need to do. So what would be the slope of this one? What would it be? Negative 6, and the y-intercept would be 8. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you the next two, and I want you to try these on your own. Give you a couple minutes. Shelby, what you got?
Y equals negative 11x plus 13.
So we got y equals negative 11x plus 13. Does somebody have something different? Susie?
Isn't it negative y equals negative 11x?
Remember, slope-intercept form has just y, so negatives in front of the y are not permitted. All right, what do you think you got, Leilani?
Y equals negative x equals negative 13.
No x term? Negative x? So y equals negative 11x minus 13, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. What you got?
Y equals negative 11x plus 13.
All right, so we got some variations of signs, so let's see what the real answer is. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the 11x. How? I'm going to subtract it from both sides. Why? Because it was originally positive. That leaves me with a negative in front of my y. So I get negative y is equal to negative 11x plus 13. But slope-intercept form did not have a negative. So we're going to get rid of it by either multiplying or dividing every term by negative 1. Because remember, that's what's in front of the y is a negative 1. So two negatives make a positive, so I get y. Two negatives make a positive, I get 11x. Signs are different, I'm going to get a negative, and I get 13. So my slope is? What's my slope? 11, and my y-intercept? Okay. All right, who thinks they have the answer for the second one? Okay, Donnie?
Y equals negative 3 over 10x plus 9.
So y equals negative 3/10 x plus 9. Okay, anybody with something else? So either you all have the same answer or you haven't done it yet. Let's see if Donnie's right. So the opposite of a positive 3x would be a negative 3x. So that gives me 10y is equal to negative 3x plus 90. And then the opposite of multiplying by 10 is dividing by 10. So I'm going to divide everything by 10. So that gives me y equals, signs are different, so I get a negative 3/10, and then the x opposite the fraction bar. And then 90 divided by 10 is 9. Okay. And again, if I wanted to figure out the slope, I'd look in front of the x and get negative 3/10. If I want to figure out the y-intercept, I'd look after, and I get 9. Okay. All right, so the next three are three off of the 12 problems you're supposed to be doing for homework tonight on the one-sided, who said a verbal contract, blah, 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 blah. So you've got one of those, you fill in puzzles. So the reason why I wanted to go through these is that these have problems in that they don't quite meet standard form. So if you notice, all three of them, the x term is negative. In two of them, there are fractions. In fact, one of them has two fractions. And in one of them, there's a decimal. So I want to make sure that you know how to deal with it. Now, there's one more problem that has a fraction, but if you write these down, you'll have a model how to solve that other one. All right, so same rules apply. I want to get the x on the other side. Since it's negative, the opposite would be adding. So I'm going to add 6x to both sides. And that leaves me with 3/4 y equals 6x plus 9. So now we go back to chapter 2, and what did I say we should do if there's a coefficient in front of a variable that's a fraction? How do we get rid of it? If we did division, that would give us fractions inside of fractions. So we talked about a better way of solving this. Anyone remember? We're going to multiply everything by the reciprocal. So we multiply every term, by 4/3. To make this a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and give denominators of 1. So on the left, 3 over 3 is 1, 4 over 4 is 1, 1 times y is y. Over here, 3 goes into itself once and into 6 twice. So I get 2 times 4 is 8, and then there's the x. 3 goes into itself once and into 9 3 times, and then 3 times 4 is 12. So that's how you would get the answer of y equals 8x plus 12. We have a similar problem on number 6. The first term is negative. To make it go to the other side, the inverse operation would be to add. So we're going to add 4.5x to both sides. That leaves me with 9y equals 4.5x plus 18. And now all I'm going to do is divide both sides by 9. And that means everything. So the only place I run into a little bit of trouble is that 4.5 being divided by 9. So off to the side, I just take care of that. Bring the decimal up, and then divide. 9 goes into 45 5 times evenly. So I get 9y divided by 9 is y. 4.5 divided by 9 is 0.5x. And then 18 divided by 9 is 2. And then last but not least, we've got this guy down here. He again starts with a negative, so we're going to add 3/4 x to both sides. That leaves me with negative 1/2 y equals 3/4 x plus 3. And just like in number 5, to get rid of a coefficient that's a fraction, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So we're going to actually multiply both sides by -2. The only place it gets a little weird is over here with the fraction at the x. And so on the left, we've got -2 times -1/2 is +1 times y is y. Over here, 2 goes into itself once and into 4 twice. So I have 3 times -1 is -3, 2 times 1 is 2, and then I have the x. And then 3 times -2 is -6. So that's probably the harder of all of them, hardest one. Okay? And that's what homework's going to be about.